So Kevin, soldiers mess up in the United States Army. They face adverse administrative actions. They get kicked out. But at least some of these guys have good skills that they can carry on into the civilian community. That is, unless they also lose their security clearance.
Right.
So I have faced soldiers who said, I don't care what happens to me. I just need to keep my clearance. I'm sure you've run across those in your days.
Especially people who are in the intel community. Your soldiers working in the two shops, they're very keen on keeping those clearances no matter what may happen to their career, because they know that their career trajectory in the civilian world could be way different if that gets revoked.
Right. I tell you, in the last month, I've dealt with 2 senior leaders in Cyber Command that were like, look, this security clearance is essential to my career outside of the military. So how does a security clearance revocation work? I mean, they can't just pull it and you're done, right? There's a process, correct?
Right. There is a process. There's some regulatory due process that the soldier is entitled to. The first step is going to be that you're going to be notified that this action is being considered against you.
Right.
But I would actually prefer to maybe take it back one more step, Will.
Sure.
Before that, because I think that it's very important. One of the first things that a soldier should consider if they have done something that could be an issue, whether it's something financial, lost a bunch of money gambling, bought a big purchase in cash, gotten a big inheritance, or gotten a DUI, something like that.
Or even gotten some credit problems through a divorce.
Right. There's all sorts of things that can trigger flags in these systems. And I think that what's important is one of the very first things that a soldier could do to help themselves is, after consulting with counsel, to make sure the way they're wording this is very carefully tuned, they need to go to their SSO, whoever their security manager is within their two shop, and self-report. That's always going to start the process off on a better foot than the security personnel finding out through some other means.
Yeah, like I said, it's always best to self-report and show that you recognize that there's an issue. But when the derog information or the derogatory information reaches, the S2 shop, and they say, hey, this rises to the level of us to initiate a revocation, then they issue that revocation, that notice of revocation. And who is the adjudicator of whether or not to revoke?
So the people who are responsible for actually adjudicating whether or not you keep your clearance are going to be way outside of your headquarters. These are not going to be people it's not going to be your buddy from the two shop. It's not even going to be your commander. It's going to be a bureaucratic entity that exists to adjudicate these sort of things. It used to be called CAF, and it's basically a repository that handles all of the United States Army's security clearances.
Right, and CAF is the Army's central clearance facility. Now that was replaced a few years ago by a DOD entity, right? They combined it, and that DOD entity's name is the Consolidated Adjudication Facility, which recently has undergone another name change. But yeah, so it's now goes to a DOD level. Right, so you get the initial notification, the adjudication by the DOD level, and then if you're not satisfied with it, it comes back, right? And then you have some appellate rights. But what should a soldier do if they're facing adjudication of their clearance?
Well, the very first thing that they need to do is speak to an attorney who's handled these issues before. This is not like a court martial. It's not like a separation or a GOMAR. This is a very different process. CAF, or their new name, their new acronym.
Right.
Everybody still calls it CAF in the military. They are looking for very specific things. Most notably, they want every single piece of derogatory information to be specifically rebutted. Essentially, if you leave one out, if you skip one, as you might in, say, a GOMAR, you are admitting that it does in fact rise to the level and your clearance should be revoked.
I agree, right? And so part of your rights is being given notice of the intent to revoke, and then being provided the clear statement of reasons, right? So they tell you they're going to notice to revoke you, and then they give you all the statement of reasons. Each one of those statement of reasons needs to be individually addressed, and they need to be addressed from the perspective of why this is not a threat to the security, right? To having access to classified information. That's a whole different process than saying why you shouldn't necessarily file a GOMAR in an official file, or why you should necessarily put this information in the official file of the Department of the Army AMHRS, right? That's a different process, and it's a different argument that you would make as to why this is not a security risk. You also have certain access to evidence, right? What was considered by the command or the S2 when they initiated the revocation. And if you don't have that evidence, you can demand that. Now, you also have a short period of time relatively to respond, right? If they're going to revoke your clearance, it's generally 60 days. It can be extended. There's generally latitude on how long you can extend these things because this is a really important event. And then you put your packet together and you send it off to the adjudicators, and they come back with a thumbs up or a thumbs down. If they come back with a thumbs down, hey, no, we're going to revoke, the game's not over. There are other things that you can do. But in addition to just arguing, hey, factually, this is why I should keep my clearance, are you allowed to present mitigating information?
Of course, yes. Because you can present to the adjudicators, hey, this happened. I understand that maybe it's an issue, but it doesn't affect my loyalty to the nation. It doesn't affect my ability to keep a secret. For example, going back to the beginning of our conversation, I self-reported, which is why I am not a security threat, which is why I'm not subject to things like blackmail, bribery, intimidation, things like that. And then I think it's also important that whoever your advocate is, whoever your attorney is able to inform the command on the difference between this process and whatever legal process may also be going on. Because the command, I've seen in my experience, often starts putting this in the same punishment bucket along with those other actions, whereas they need to be thinking about this as a national security issue, because that's what it is. Because a soldier who maybe has committed some misconduct maybe shouldn't be a soldier anymore in the eyes of the command. Doesn't mean that that person, that individual, that U.S. citizen is disloyal to the United States and now cannot be trusted with national security information. Those are not the same thing.
What's a DUI have to do with whether or not you have a security clearance?
Right. If you report it immediately, appropriately, with counsel, if you take responsibility for those actions, the answer is pretty clearly not much.
Right. And I suppose that your response also gets routed through the command for their recommendations.
It does. And something, frankly, that can influence the command a little bit is to think of all the second and third, fourth order effects of the soldier losing their clearance that maybe the command hasn't considered, including in certain circumstances, such as a USASOC facility or a intelligence gathering facility of some kind, their inability to literally get into the workspace because they can no longer access it.
Sure. There's some practical implications. First, soldiers need to address each allegation individually.
That's right.
Second, they need to document all corrective actions that they've taken, right? And third, they need to obtain very strong character witnesses, character evidence, right? Because that's how you're going to determine whether it's a threat for them to have secrets or not.
It's an excellent point, Will, because ultimately that's what the entire process of acquiring a clearance and then subsequently keeping that clearance is all about. Is this person's character, their loyalty to the United States, to national security, and whether they can be trusted.
If you're facing a security clearance revocation, give us a call. We're the law office of Will M. Helixon. We are your warrior advocates. You defend the nation, we defend you.